welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Our focus continues to be on the Israel-Hamas conflict. Today is the sixth and possibly final day of the Israel-Hamas Truce in the Gaza Strip. Residents of the beleaguered enclave and families of the hostages being held by Hamas are anxiously waiting to see if the fragile truce will be extended. Fighting was paused on Friday, initially for a 4-day truce, which was then extended by another 2 days. In the process, 85 hostages, both Israeli and foreigners, have been released by Hamas, and 180 Palestinian prisoners have been released from Israeli jails, primarily women and children on both sides. Significantly, Qatar, which has negotiated the truce so far, is in talks with Israel and Hamas for a further extension, but no decision has been taken so far. In fact, the chiefs of the spy agencies of the United States and Israel have also held talks in Doha. Hamas has reportedly informed the mediators that it is willing to extend the truce for another 4 days, even though Israel has said that for every additional 10 hostages released by Hamas, there will be an extra day of truce. Reports suggest that Tel Aviv is unwilling to extend the truce beyond Sunday. This when over 160 people are still in captivity in Gaza. A Hamas official has said in addition to the release of Israeli hostages as part of the truce deal, it also plans to release Russian hostages as a show of gratitude to President Vladimir Putin for Russia's position on the conflict in Gaza. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu the butcher of Gaza and accused him of spawning anti-Semitism across the world. Pope Francis has once again called for a continuation of the truce in the Gaza Strip, the release of all the hostages and humanitarian aid access into the territory. As we mentioned, CIA Director Bill Burns visited Qatar on Tuesday for meetings with Qatari officials and his Israeli and Egyptian counterparts to push for a broader hostage deal that would expand beyond women and children to include negotiations for men and soldiers. Meanwhile, the head of Doctors Without Borders has said that he was trapped with his staff inside a hospital in the occupied West Bank's Jenin refugee camp amid an ongoing Israeli raid in the densely populated area. For their part, the Israeli Defense Forces are preparing to resume their military campaign against Hamas once the truce ends. On Tuesday, the 5th day of the pause, Hamas and Israel clashed in northern Gaza, a skirmish that both sides said was a violation of the ongoing agreement. Benjamin Netanyahu has categorically stated the military operation will continue until Gaza is no longer a threat to Israel, which includes freeing all of the hostages and eliminating Hamas above and below the ground, as he put it. More aid continues to flow into Gaza amidst the truce. The US military has said it will fly 3 plane loads of humanitarian aid in the coming days. The United Nations has emphasized on the need for much greater assistance, especially supplies to operate critical services like sewage, water and hospitals. The UN's aid chief, Martin Griffiths, is holding talks in Jordan on the possibility of opening a second crossing, the Kerem Shalom crossing, to allow for humanitarian aid to enter Gaza from Israel. Since the temporary truce came into force last week, about 200 trucks carrying aid have entered Gaza on a daily basis. But the amount is nowhere enough to meet the needs of the population. The UN World Food Programme has warned that the population of Gaza, especially women and children, are at high risk of famine if humanitarian food supplies do not continue past this temporary truce. The World Health Organization has said thousands of displaced Gazans are at heightened risk of diseases as overcrowding and lack of food, water, sanitation and basic hygiene are hastening the spread of disease. In fact, they've said that in the coming days, more Palestinians in Gaza could die from disease than from the Israeli bombing if the healthcare system is not improved. The WHO chief has said, we need a sustained ceasefire now. It's a matter of life and death for civilians. Meanwhile, on the occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, India's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ruchira Kamboj, reaffirmed India's long-standing relationship with the Palestinian people and its support for a negotiated two-state solution, while adding that India has a zero-tolerance approach to terrorism. She also condemned the deaths of civilians and emphasized that it's clearly unacceptable. Ms. Kamboj added that humanitarian pauses are a welcome step to ensure the timely and continuous delivery of humanitarian aid. And she also highlighted that India has sent 70 tons of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip.
Latest numbers, 161 people remain as hostages in the Gaza Strip. That number includes 146 Israelis and 15 foreigners. That doesn't include dual nationals. As the survivors of Hamas captivity return home over the last week, we're beginning to discover new chilling details about life as Hamas hostages. I'm of course not at liberty to share information from the official investigations, but the evidence that the families have been sharing with the media is chilling. The hostages were not held in reasonable conditions, as some have cynically claimed. Our children were serially abused. Just like Hamas recorded its own crimes against humanity on October 7th, it continues to document its own atrocities, releasing footage of crowds terrorizing the hostages in their final moments of captivity. The testimonies are harrowing. Little Emily Hand's father Thomas has movingly told media that she only speaks in whispers because she was conditioned not to make a noise. He sees the terror in her eyes. She thought that she had been held hostage for a whole year. Her face is gaunt. She thought that everyone, including her father, had been murdered or abducted on October 7th, and her father has had to break the news to her that her stepmother had also been murdered on that dark day. The IDF continues to use this hostage release pause to strengthen our preparations and approve battle plans for the continuation of the war to destroy Hamas in response to the October 7th massacre, and we will continue when Hamas stops releasing hostages, continuing towards those main goals of destroying Hamas so it can never hurt our people following the October 7th massacre and bringing home all of the hostages. This war will end with the end of Hamas.
Netanyahu, who carried out one of the biggest cruelties of the last century in Gaza, has already written his name in history as the Butcher of Gaza. The black mark has attached itself not only onto Netanyahu, but all of those who support him unconditionally. This mark of stain will never be cleaned. We view the hostage exchanges and the humanitarian pause that began on Friday as a positive development in terms of a stop of bloodshed, even a little bit. We thank all brotherly countries that contributed to the implementation of the agreement.
As the Assembly's resolution had foreseen, only a truce could allow sincere efforts to begin to address the humanitarian catastrophe being inflicted by Israel, the occupying power, in Gaza. Only a truce could lead to the release of people held in captivity and avoid further regional escalation. This truce must turn into a permanent ceasefire. The massacres of Palestinian children, women, and men cannot resume, should not resume. You should not allow it to resume. The human conscience cannot bear it. International law, including humanitarian and human rights law, prohibits it. International law, but also the norms of humanity, demand that we act to stop this war against innocent civilians and save human lives, that we act for humanitarian aid and access throughout the Gaza Strip, the return of those displaced without delay, the end of the siege and blockade, and that we act for accountability. Nothing can ever justify war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide.
All right, so what happens next? Let's try and find the answers to some of those questions that are blowing in the wind. Joining me on Global Lens tonight, we have back with us Annette Bernstein-Reich, CEO of the Israel-India Friendship Agency. I'm not sure if I've got the name of the organization correct. Lev Aaron, Israeli columnist and journalist, and Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, defense and geopolitical expert, joining us live from New Delhi tonight. Thank you so much to all my three guests for coming back on the show. Anat, starting with you, welcome back. The million-dollar question that is on everyone's mind right now. The truce originally was meant to last 4 days. We saw an extension by 48 hours. Hamas has clearly indicated its willingness to extend it by another 4 days at least. And we are given to understand that Qatar has been actively negotiating a possible extension of this truce. Of course, the United States has been involved. The Mossad chief and the CIA chief have met in Doha. What are you picking up from your sources? What are the indications? People are waiting with bated breath to find out if there could be yet another extension.
I guess that there was first a good evening, Neha. Nice to be here. We are now in the 6th day of ceasefire, which started on Friday. Hamas, as you and I heard, are willing to go on another 4 days. And from the beginning, if you remember, the truce was about up to 10 days, as long as they release at least 10 hostages each day. So I guess that if they are able to release and find, as I say, as they call it, 10 hostages per day, the ceasefire will continue at least until Sunday. Now, Neha, please pay attention. I'm wearing an orange color today, and this is as a tribute to the Bibas family, the 10 months baby which is held captive by Hamas. And they are using the Bibas family, the redhead family, as their, I would say, we call it the tiniest child. They were supposed to release the children first, and they're not keeping their agreement. So we have here a problem with Hamas standing to their commitments to release the children. They come up with very, I would say, weak excuses. And this can be a problem to the continuation of the agreement. I truly hope that they will come to their senses and release all the children. There are still children held by Hamas, and the children that were released in the past few days start to talk. Some can whisper, as you rightly said. But some are telling us very sad stories about the way they were kept by the Hamas, which makes us even more worried for the children that are still there.
There is no doubt that it is heartbreaking to think about the little children and babies who continue to be in Hamas captivity, which is one of the many reasons why perhaps it is so important for this truce to continue, not to mention the fact that it's also brought some much needed respite to the people of Gaza who have withstood relentless fighting and bombing for weeks now. Let me go across to Lev Aaron. Lev, I will put to you the same question that I asked Anat. How strong do you believe are the chances that we're going to see another extension of this truce? Today is the 6th day. It could be the final day, but many have expressed the hope that it may be extended. Hamas seems willing. Where do you think Israel stands on this? And could the terms and conditions of the truce change were an extension to take place?
Okay, so of course it could, we can have it for a few more days, but the persistent continuation of military operation involving air, land, sea engagement is necessitated by most Israelis because of the angry squad of radical Islam and Hamas, whose rage is against Western and Jewish civilization itself. So the point is that what most Israelis want is not a ceasefire, but a peace. And as long as Hamas does not see two-state solution as something that he can digest because of his, let's say, Islamic beliefs, it seems like after the ceasefire, a war will be there, and Israel is still feeling that without winning the Hamas in battle, in the long run, we will have many more hostages. And I will add another sentence. I think also many Israelis feel that it is like our last chance to have a one-front war against Hamas. Right now, it seems like in Lebanon, Hezbollah does not have much of an appetite to fight against Israel in a big war. And the same is true about Iran. At least that's how we feel. Maybe we are wrong. So right now, it feels like we have a one-front war against Hamas. And who knows if we have, let's say, a long ceasefire of half a year, of 1 year, if the next war against Hamas would not be a two-front war, a three-front war. So it is not only about the hostages. We are so happy that the hostages are back home, but there is also the rational, not only feeling, but even some kind of commitment that we have to have the war against Hamas as long as we are sure that we can win the war in a reasonable time. Thank you.
Okay. Of course, the Israeli Prime Minister has said repeatedly that our ultimate goal is to wipe Hamas out. That's the only way this war is going to end. Both he and the Defense Minister have repeatedly said that once the ceasefire is over, the military campaign will continue, or rather resume. But let me get a word in from Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. Sir, the way things stand currently, do you believe there is likely to be an extension of this truce? Because thankfully, barring a few episodes of some skirmishes here and there, the truce has held for 6 days. We've in fact seen an extension of the 4-day truce by 2 days. A whole host of hostages, at least 85, have been released. 180 Palestinian prisoners have also been set free, not to mention the fact that this truce has brought some desperately needed respite to the beleaguered Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. As talks in Qatar continue, what is your hunch, sir? Do you believe that we are likely to see a further extension of this truce, and that in the process we could see perhaps Israel, making fresh conditions before Hamas? For example, to say we want our men back, we want our soldiers back, though that is something that Hamas has so far ruled out. What's your take?
Neha, thank you very much. I think I'm as hopeful as you are, and both Lev and Anand, primarily because we look forward. They've had a truce, and this is a golden opportunity for Hamas to stop the war. Hamas would have realized what destruction causes. You rightly brought out over 1 lakh odd people are suffering from hunger, food, water, everything, and there are likely to be more deaths from hunger than there would have been from the bombardment, which has been almost about 15,000 people who are dead so far. I think at this point of time, primarily because the Hamas insistence all for all, that means we will release your men, you release all our men. Well, that may not be acceptable to Israel, because Israel must be holding thousands of Palestinians. Even now from the West Bank, they've almost picked up 112 of those in the night patrols, the clashes that have taken place. So Israel may not go in for all in all. But so far, even if you see about 30 odd hostages are below 18, about 36 of them are below 55, and about the balance of them, about 19 of them are above 55 and going as high as even 90 years. So if that be so, and there are some children still there. So Hamas has been insisting in releasing women and children and are not releasing the men. whereas most of, even from Israel also, most of them are women and children of the Palestinians that have been released. So the men folk have been kept, and in fact 4 have died in captivity, in Hamas captivity, and one of them is an Israeli soldier. So that is the situation. So I think there's total lack of trust, there's total lack of this thing, and all this has been orchestrated, managed by tremendous amount of pressure coming from Egypt, coming from USA, Qatar, and the way the things are moving. I sincerely hope, even if it is held for 2 days, if Hamas was to show some consideration, release 10 Israeli hostages on the first day, that's tomorrow, and again release 10 after that, probably the intentions would be clear, rather than bringing in kind of conditions. You release our men first, all for all, this kind of, and that, and again 200 trucks per day. The Gazans have started feeling the pinch of it, because 200 trucks aren't enough. The Hamas is insisting that the trucks aren't allowed to come into North Gaza. There is crisis for fuel. The Americans are insisting that the southern Gaza should not be bombarded again by the Israelis if the ceasefire fails. So there is tremendous pressure in Israel. There is no denying the fact. The world pressure is in Israel that the hostilities must stop. But yet, the terror must also be eliminated. There is no question of terror, because right now it's not a war only between Hamas and Israel. It's a war with terror. And if this terror comes to use for whatever the reason it is, if the Hamas had 30,000 fighters, and even if we assume that 10,000 are dead, there are 20,000 still living. Even if we assume that all of northern Gaza has been evacuated, there are 500 kilometers worth of tunnels that are existing. There will be a whole lot of them will logistically self-sustaining. So there is a threat. There is no denying the fact that Israel suffers under a massive threat. And the kind of things and the world opinion has been created against Israel to say that they should be humanitarian. I think it's time now, even Hamas, though an elected body of the Gaza Strip, and they also have their own concerns with Fatah in the West Bank, whatever it be, I think Hamas, it's time for Hamas to now show some consideration, so that if they require a world peace, Hamas has to take the lead. Israel must also ensure that the civilians are not hurt, too many of them, because in any case, if there is war, it's extremely, extremely difficult to find out. So there will be casualties, and therefore Israel must prevent that. Hamas must come forward. I think as a first step, release 10 tomorrow. I think that let there be a good beginning. Day after another 10, because they have 116 captivity. So if after all this, the elimination of Hamas, what the Israeli Prime Minister says, Neha, seems a very, very difficult proposition. You cannot eliminate Hamas totally. The ideology will continue. 10,000 are dead, maybe 15,000 will die, maybe 20,000 will die. But to say we will eliminate Hamas, that seems rather, rather impossible. And therefore, Israel must also see that point of view. And also the Hamas must look at it by releasing hostages, that the world peace is there, and West Asia should move towards peace. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem for the entire world. But terror must be eliminated.
Okay, you've made some very interesting points, sir. You're right. This is something we've debated on this show time and time and again. Is it really a realistic goal for Israel to say we're going to finish off Hamas? But it's interesting you say that Hamas needs to take the first step towards ending the war. The trouble is there is a deep trust deficit. Even if Hamas were to make that announcement tomorrow that we're ending this war, the Israelis go on saying we do not trust them. They are a terror organization, and they have threatened to wreak many more October 7th on us. How do we ever trust them? That is a big part of the problem here. But let me go back to our Israeli guest, sir, and I'll come back to you. Anand, let me ask you this. Israel had said at the beginning of this temporary truce that for every 10 additional hostages released by Hamas, we are willing to extend the truce by 10 days. However, you are categorical that Israel will not agree to extend the truce beyond Sunday. Now, if you do the math, if they still have 160 plus hostages in their captivity, and you extend the truce by another 4 days and you get only 10 a day, well then that means that well over 100 people, most of them Israelis, will continue to be in Hamas captivity in Gaza come Monday. While you say that Israel's primary objective is to finish off Hamas, isn't it equally important for you to bring back each of those hostages? That is one of the stated objectives of this war, isn't it? How are you going to achieve that if Israel has made up its mind about not extending the truce at all beyond Sunday?
I don't remember that I said that Israel will not extend. I said that Israel said that at the moment, the agreement is for 10 days, okay? With rules that were agreed and terms that were agreed between the parties. The problem that Hamas is not standing to their commitments according to the agreement now already, and they're breaching it every day. They have separated on purpose a mother and a daughter 2 days before they were supposed to be released. They released the daughter, they kept the mother in captivity. And they are playing those games time and again. So Hamas, if they really want to continue the truce and continue the ceasefire so that they will release more hostages, they need to come clean, something that it's a bit difficult for them, I guess. And Israel, the number one priority is hostages. And I totally agree with you. If we get the hostages, we will wait, because for us, every soul is precious and every hostage is important to us. But we need a partner to do that. They're playing games saying that some of the hostages are being kept by the jihad, Islamic Jihad. Some hostages, like the Bibas family, the Redheads, are being kept by other terrorist group. So they're playing those games. Enough to play games. They need to come up clean, at least in this agreement. Qatar is working hard along with the US and Egypt. You're right about that. And if we are able to get our hostages back, we will wait. I don't see it happening. I wish it would happen. Every person, we know them by name, we know them by heart, and we're waiting for them to come. If it will happen, we will wait.
Okay, if it helps, we will wait. That is very interesting, because a lot of reports seem to suggest that there is an unwillingness on part of Israel to continue the truce beyond Sunday. So, Lev, let me ask you this question. According to the number crunching that many have done, if 10 hostages were to be released by Hamas per day, you would need to wait for at least 2.5 weeks for all the hostages to be released. If, let's say, hypothetically, Hamas were to agree to release all the hostages, provided the truce carried on, would Israel be willing to consider having the truce beyond Sunday? Because while there is a lot of talk about how there are concerns that Hamas will regroup and rearm itself during this pause in the fighting, but you do want the hostages back. So is that an option that Israel, you think, would be seriously willing to consider? 2.5 weeks, like I said, at the very least.
So I totally agree with Anat. There is nothing more important for us than to see the hostages coming back. It is our duty as a government. They lived in the kibbutzim next to the border inside Israel. They were dancing in the party, and we are obliged to bring them back. So I guess, like Anat, that the public pressure will make it difficult for the government of Israel to refuse to continue giving Hamas more days of ceasefire in exchange of 10 abductees, hostages a day. The question, will Hamas agree to give us 10 hostages on a daily basis, is another factor, because also Hamas knows that once it does not have any more hostages, let's say Israel is sure that all the hostages are now with the Islamic Jihad and not with Hamas. So Hamas knows that Israel will be even more willing to fight and beat and finish Hamas. Not Hamas as an idea. I agree with the general. You cannot beat an idea. But Hamas as a political and as an army that can hurt us so much, as we saw in October. So in this sense, I think, yes, it is okay for us, for most Israelis, and also for the government to digest a ceasefire with 10 days hostages per day. On the other hand, I'm not sure, exactly like Anat said, that Hamas will do it. First of all, because they are a terror group, and the second reason is because they know that once they don't have hostages, they don't have also any leverage on Israel.
Okay, though I really wonder if that leverage has helped Hamas in any significant way, given that this war has gone on for 2 months now, and before the temporary truce, we saw relentless bombing of Gaza, followed by a ground assault by the Israeli forces. But let me put that question to the General. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, our Israeli guests seem to believe that while Israel may be open to the idea of extending the truce for the sake of getting all its hostages back home safely, they are skeptical that Hamas will be willing to release all the hostages, because then they lose the leverage that they have over Israel in this war. Therefore, sir, I'm going to ask you, in your assessment, how do you see things panning out over the next few days? There are also reports that have suggested that Israel, especially, the hardliners in the Netanyahu government, are quite unwilling to let this truce last beyond 10 days, which certainly means that they will not have all the hostages back. How do you see this panning out?
True, Neha. I think there is a lot of pressure on the Benjamin government, primarily because the coalition itself, even though Ben Gvir, who is the interior minister for them, has threatened to resign. They have just 6 members, but they have 3 ministers. So there is a tremendous amount of pressure that that Israel should continue for war against Hamas, and that must continue for whatever the reason it may be. But whatever it may be, I think Israel has managed to convey to the Palestinians, to the Hamas, and to all in West Asia that do not mess around. If anyone in West Asia seems to feel that the Jews can be thrown into the sea, well, they can forget about it. And the way the Gaza has been flattened is absolutely clear to Hamas and to the West Bank and even to Hezbollah and Houthi that they better stay away. And other countries looking for an opportunity or even supporting this terrorist organization have also understood, whatever it may be, it is Israel which ultimately will win with the kind of support they have from America and the kind of support they have from Europe, and rightly so, because they're fighting against terror. They cannot be threatened of being thrown into the sea. Well, that is totally, everybody must forget. And Hamas must also realize now the two-state solution, which the UN has said, again, the UN has rather erred on one side. The old solution, the dividing Palestine into Arab and Jews, well, now what they call it as Palestinians, and the Jews they call the Israelis, and giving Jerusalem as a common capital, that will never work out. How is it possible that Jerusalem can be a common capital for 2 states? They've been at war for all these years, right from 1948 till date. So these kind of solutions are not workable. Yes, 2-state solution, it could well be decided on Jerusalem. At that point of time, they decided that would be an internationally monitored place. That can't work out. But to say, well, we'll make a Jerusalem as a common capital, which has just come out from a UN statement, I think that may not work out. At this point of time, I think Israel has to have a very strong way of conveying it to the Hamas that, look, another 2 days, 20, and I would go with Lab to say that yes, Hamas probably does not have that many hostages as what is being claimed, because they would be with other terrorist organizations, whoever may have been involved in it. And even Hamas, at the most, even if they release 20, thereafter what? If they do not have the hostages that can be released by Hamas, or if Qatar does not have that kind of leverage
that is a
over
claim.
Them,
that's the claim made by Hamas. I mean, how do we know that the Islamic Jihad is not working in cahoots with Hamas, and that these smaller organizations that may have some people in their captivity are not working in cahoots with Hamas? That's just a claim that Hamas is making. I'm not sure we can take it at face value.
Absolutely. Hamas has absolutely no leverage over there because much that Islamic Jihad and everybody may be there if they have it. Because at this point of time, even communication with all of them would have failed. They wouldn't know where they are. Most of them may have migrated on to Jordan, gone elsewhere into Syria and everywhere. So there is a lot of, I would say, a confusion even amongst Hamas and West Bank and the rest of them. So whatever Hamas, I think right now it's time for Hamas. They must give up and surrender. That is the only way Hamas should do to prevent further, I would say, the damage that would have been caused. Because southern Gaza, if the bombardment starts in southern Gaza with effect from, say, if not tomorrow, day after, even if it is day after tomorrow, it will be catastrophic. I don't think the Palestinians will be able to face that kind of
will have nowhere to
bombardment
go.
from southern Gaza.
Because they've already been asked to move from the north to the south. If bombing of southern Gaza begins as well, and Egypt making it clear they're not going to take any refugees, the Palestinians will have absolutely nowhere to go. But let me go back to Anat at this point. Anat, you know, of course, it's very hard to believe that an organization like Hamas will suddenly have a change of heart and say, all right, we're willing to surrender. But the question is, as the general said, that, you know, maybe Israel has set itself a somewhat unrealistic target of completely wiping out Hamas, because it's not just an organization, it's not just about its military infrastructure and thousands of its cadre, it's also about the idea, the ideology that has existed for a very long time. So I'm going to ask you this: what would constitute a victory for Israel in this war in concrete, tangible, realistic terms?
I think that the victory is peace to the southern part of Israel, in a sense that a victory will be no rockets, no rocket barrage on Israel. Once this happens, it means that we have weakened Hamas and they stop attacking us. To say that we will eradicate Hamas, I truly hope that it will happen. We will definitely weaken Hamas. And all we want, as I time and again tell you, we want peace. We don't want to be attacked. We don't want to have sirens here. And we want Hamas to go out of Gaza and let their people live in peace. I guess that many people in Gaza want it too, but they are too weak to face Hamas. As my colleague said, I wish they will surrender. I'm a bit skeptical of this option, but definitely with a bit more pressure, they will able to consider it. I think that Qatar can play a role here, Egypt can play a role here, but it will take some time. I mean, they are still strong, they are still have ammunition and fuel and whatever needs to continue harassing Israel. So we cannot stop right now, because we will go to square one and we will be attacked again. And it's their mission. It's not me that is saying it. They are saying it. They are declaring it over and over that that's their intention. So what am I supposed to do? What Israel is supposed to do? Sit idle and wait? This is something that we're saying all the time. I don't find other solution than weakening Hamas and making them even let their leaders leave the Gaza Strip. That's a start. Don't surrender to Israel.
Well,
to Qatar.
the interesting fact is that a lot of the leaders are already not in Gaza. They are hiding far away in the luxury and comfort and safety of Qatar. So
maybe Yahya Sinwar and his brother and his colleagues also move to Qatar and let their people go, as we say.
Okay, so Lev, let me ask you this question. Do you believe there's even a remote possibility that Hamas suddenly has a change of heart and says, all right, we surrender? And will that be the end of the war? Here, take your hostages, we surrender. Will that be the end of the war? And what role can countries like Egypt, Qatar, Jordan play in all of this? We know that they've played a big role in negotiating this temporary truce, but the world wants to see an end to the war, not just a temporary truce. What role do you think these countries can play?
I don't think right now we can see Hamas giving up the war. I also do not see Hamas recognizing any part of Israel, even as 1 square inch of Israel will always be for Hamas part of the Muslim land, a Palestinian land. And look, anyway, eradicating the notion that any region that once was under Muslim authority must inevitably become again under Muslim authority is not an idea that we can kill. We cannot kill the idea of Hamas. We cannot kill the idea of the Muslim Brothers. We cannot kill the idea of Maulana Maududi. We cannot kill all these ideas, but we can reduce the acceptability of these ideas. And once those who want to promote these jihadistic ideas, they lose a war, also the acceptability that they have among their own people is much less. So in a way, it is not that we have a military solution to horrific ideas. There is no military solution to horrific ideas. But once you win a war, still you know that the idea has a, let's say, a lesser acceptability and political clout than it had before the war.
All right. Let me go back to Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni. General Kulkarni, you know, the question really is, how do we bring an end to this war? Because frankly, nobody believes at this point that Hamas would be willing to end this war unilaterally, or that it would be willing to surrender and peacefully return all the hostages. Therefore, what do you think is the way forward? Because just too many Palestinians, frankly, have suffered in the last 8 months. Too many have died on both sides. According to you, what greater role can the Arab world play going ahead?
Sorry, Nia, I couldn't hear you very well. But if I understand the role that you are wanting to know from me would be played. See, at the moment, it's very important that the Palestinians themselves have not as yet raised their voice against Hamas. And that's something which is alarming. The amount of suffering that they have all gone, even presuming that out of 12 lakh in northern Gaza, all of them have left Gaza, and just about 1 lakh are left, and all the Hamas fighters are there, whatever the number they may be. Still, the Palestinians haven't raised their voice, and that is something which we really need to look about. Therefore, even if Hamas are eliminated, the Palestinians seem to be supporting it. Whether it is out of fear or it is out of sheer, the ideology that seems to be pushing them, and that is something which is dangerous. Israel has to ensure, it is just not Hamas, it has to also ensure that Hezbollah must not threaten northern Israel. Israel has to ensure that even Houthi, therefore it's a comprehensive package of peace that Israel would be looking at, so that neither Qatar nor Egypt or anybody for that matter might all that they might work for peace. It is Iran that has a tremendous amount of influence over the other two organizations also, Hezbollah and Houthi. They also need to be have to play a big role, and therefore a comprehensive package, not just with Hamas, and thereafter the Israelis are left to and here after the sort of peace that might just happen at Gaza, you might have the Hezbollah doing it. And after all this, during the same period, you find Hamas regrouped again, putting Israel into trouble. So obviously, Israel is looking for total safety, and therefore, this is the final call. It's a call for Israel's survival. Israel is to ensure that nothing hereinafter can happen to Israel. Israel must not be threatened at all by any party whatsoever. And the West Asians have to give a word of honor, which again Hamas and this terrorist organization don't want it. Imagine for all these years, Egypt has recognized, Jordan has recognized Israel, Hamas hasn't recognized Israel. if that is the way, there's a real catch-22 situation that Israel is in right now. So maybe 2 days, maybe a little more pressure, because there has to be a military pressure. There is no other way. Of course, there is no military solution, but there has to be a feeling of military pressure that must come on Gaza to feel. The fear must be that should they not now going for kind of a resolution of the present crisis, they are in for tremendous amount of trouble. And Iran is looking for all that. There are countries which wouldn't want peace over there. They would much want the elimination of Israel. If that is what the whole start is, then it's a no-go situation. I think at this point of time, it is time now. Qatar must use its influence. Egypt, Jordan must use its influence on Gaza and be able to tell Hamas that enough is enough. Otherwise, everybody is going to get wiped out. If they are looking at Israel wiping out, they will also get wiped out, and all others will also. And there are countries in waiting. Everybody knows there are countries in waiting, so that there will be a time when, because of American involvement in Ukraine, they would say that the weapons over there will sooner or later get, after all, deplete. The same kind of help may not be able to come towards Israel, because Israel has also got about $12 billion of arms and equipment from America to fight all this. It may not be a lifelong thing which will go on. And there are countries like China, Iran, Russia, all waiting with all the resources and arms that they have. So it's a real catch-22 situation, and therefore it is in the interest of Israel not to be too headstrong. It is also in the interest of Hamas not to go beyond a point, and now to say, okay, it's truce, and Israel has conveyed its point of view, and therefore not wipe out Hamas, but definitely ensure its own safety, and the world must play a role. The UN, which has virtually become a defunct organization, must also play a major role to ensure that there is peace prevailing in West Asia.
I totally agree, sir. The international community needs to play a much bigger role, because it's the Palestinian people who are caught in the crossfire between the Hamas terror organization and Israel. And like you said, before you know it, Israel could be faced with a multi-front war is at a risk that Israel is willing to take. The stakes are incredibly high, not just for the Palestinians and the Israelis, but for the entire region and indeed the entire world. On that note, Anat Bernstein, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, Lev Aaron, thank you so much for joining me on Global Lens. We look forward to having all of you back.